We are often led to believe that the key to success and happiness lies in control. Control over our careers, our relationships, and even the trajectory of our future. We plan, we strategize, we try to anticipate every possible outcome, thinking that if we just hold on tightly enough, everything will fall into place. But what happens when, despite all our efforts, we feel more drained, more uncertain, and more disconnected than ever before? The truth is, real peace isn't found in control. It's found in the exact opposite: letting go. It's about loosening our grip on the things beyond our reach, shifting our focus inward, and embracing the journey rather than forcing a destination. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach us to suppress emotions or abandon responsibility. It teaches us to recognize what's within our power and to release what isn't. When we understand this, we discover a strength we never knew existed, a quiet, unshakable kind of power. I want to share with you lessons that changed my life, hard-earned truths that cost me time, struggle, and heartache to learn. So, listen closely, stay with me until the end, because this might just be the turning point you didn't realize you needed. What if I told you that sometimes having less can give you everything? Think about your life right now. What is taking up too much space? It could be physical clutter, toxic relationships, the weight of other people's expectations, or even the relentless noise inside your own mind. We're often conditioned to believe that more is better, that accumulating wealth, status, and possessions will lead to fulfillment. But does it? The more we chase, the heavier we feel. The more we cling, the more we fear loss. I once read a quote that hit me like a bolt of lightning. A wise man does not grieve for what he does not have, but rejoices in what he possesses. At first it felt like just another philosophical phrase, something that sounded good but wasn't practical in real life. But then life taught me otherwise. For years, I worked tirelessly in a high-paying job that I believed would give me freedom. Instead, I found myself shackled by deadlines, performance metrics, and the unrelenting pressure to meet expectations that weren't even my own. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent years fighting for a version of success that left me feeling empty. Eventually, I made a radical decision. I walked away. I left behind the job, the constant comparisons, and the suffocating idea that my worth was tied to my achievements. With nothing but a backpack, I moved to a quiet countryside village, away from the noise, away from the race. At first, the silence was deafening. The lack of busyness felt unnatural, almost unsettling. But then, something unexpected happened. I started noticing things I had been too distracted to see before. The way the morning light painted golden patterns on my walls. The scent of fresh earth after the rain. The feeling of taking a deep breath with no rush to be anywhere. Slowly, I realized that happiness wasn't something I needed to chase. It had been waiting for me all along, hidden beneath the clutter of unnecessary worries. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." The moment I let go of external pressures, my thoughts became lighter, my mind felt clearer, and with that clarity came an overwhelming sense of peace. But how do we begin to let go in a world that constantly demands more? Start by practicing stillness. Take 5 minutes each day to sit in silence, without distractions. No phone, no music, no endless scrolling, just you and your thoughts. It sounds simple, but in a world addicted to noise, true stillness is rare. And in that stillness, you'll start to hear yourself again. Next, declutter. Not just your home, but your mind. Look at everything in your life and ask, is this adding to my peace or taking from it? Let go of the things that no longer serve you. That includes relationships that drain you, expectations that aren't yours to carry, and thoughts that keep you trapped in the past or anxious about the future. One small habit that transformed my life was minimalist journaling. Instead of overwhelming myself with long to-do lists, I started writing down just 3 priorities for the day. Not 10, not 20, just 3. And at the end of the day, if I had completed those 3 things, I felt accomplished rather than defeated. Letting go isn't easy. We cling to the familiar, even when it weighs us down. But here's what I've learned. The more you let go, the freer you become. One of the most profound lessons from Stoic philosophy is that it's not the man who has too little that is poor, it's the one who craves more. Imagine for a moment what your life would look like if you let go of everything that wasn't truly necessary, if you no longer sought perfection, if you no longer compared yourself to others. You'd feel lighter, wouldn't you? And before we go any further, I want you to sit with one question. If today you could only keep what truly matters, what would remain? Because when less becomes everything, you don't just find freedom, you find yourself. Now imagine standing beside a river. In your hand you hold a small leaf, a symbol of all your worries, all the burdens you've carried for too long. You clutch it tightly, unwilling to release it. But the more you hold on, the more it withers and the more exhausted you feel. So why not let it go? That's not loss, that's freedom. Life is constantly changing. Seasons shift, rivers flow, people come and go. The more we resist this natural rhythm, the more we suffer. Marcus Aurelius once observed that the universe loves change, that nature thrives on transformation. Yet we fight against it. We fear the unknown, resist endings, and cling to things that no longer belong to us. But have you ever noticed that it's the act of holding on that causes the most pain? A relationship that has run its course, yet we refuse to let go because we're afraid of being alone. A job that drains our soul, but we stay because we fear failure. A past mistake that keeps replaying in our mind, even though it no longer defines who we are. I once poured years of my life into a project I believed in. I gave it everything, my time, my energy, my heart. But over time, I realized it no longer aligned with who I was becoming. Still, I held on, convincing myself that quitting would mean failure. The truth. The real failure was refusing to let go. The moment I walked away, I didn't feel regret. I felt relief. Because for the first time in years, I had made space for something new. Epictetus reminds us that we can't control what happens, only how we respond. So instead of resisting life's current, why not flow with it? Each day, practice letting go in small ways. Release the frustration when someone cuts you off in traffic. Accept that not everyone will understand you. Recognize that some doors close for a reason. And most importantly, remember this. Letting go isn't about losing. It's about making room for what's meant to come next. There's something deeply liberating about realizing that not everything needs to be held onto. Not every battle needs to be fought. Not every relationship needs to be saved, and not every expectation needs to be met. And yet, we carry so much. Worries about the future, regrets about the past, the invisible weight of expectations we never asked for. It's like walking through life with a heavy backpack, filled with things we don't even need. But what if you set it down? Imagine that. The relief of no longer carrying what isn't yours to bear. The lightness of moving forward unburdened. The truth is, most of what we cling to isn't real. It's just fear disguised as responsibility, anxiety dressed up as ambition. Stoic philosophy reminds us that suffering isn't caused by events themselves, but by how we interpret them. You might lose a job, end a relationship, face rejection, or experience failure. But the real pain isn't in what happens, it's in how you hold on to it afterward. And the question you need to ask yourself is this: what are you holding on to that is holding you back? I used to believe that if I just worked harder, pushed more, controlled every detail, I could shape life exactly as I wanted. But the more I tried to force things, the more frustrated and lost I became. It took me years to understand that sometimes the greatest power isn't in controlling, it's in surrendering. Picture standing in the ocean, waves crashing against you. If you resist, the water slams into you with force, knocking you off balance. But if you relax and let the waves carry you, you float effortlessly. Life is no different. Think about a time when something didn't go your way. Maybe you lost an opportunity. Maybe someone disappointed you. Maybe something you worked hard for slipped through your fingers. At that moment, it felt unfair, painful, maybe even unbearable. But looking back, can you see how that experience shaped you? How it pushed you towards something better? What if, instead of resisting, you started trusting? This isn't about being passive or indifferent. It's about understanding that you cannot force life to unfold on your timeline, that clinging to things that are meant to pass only causes unnecessary suffering, that letting go isn't giving up, it's giving yourself permission to move forward. There was a time in my life when I stayed in a situation I had outgrown simply because I was afraid of what would happen if I walked away. The job wasn't fulfilling me. The people around me weren't aligned with my values. And yet I stayed because leaving felt like losing. But I wasn't losing. I was evolving. It wasn't until I finally let go that I realized I had been holding myself back all along. And once I made that choice, new doors opened, opportunities appeared, and I felt lighter than I had in years. The irony is, we often think letting go will leave us with nothing, but in reality, it clears space for everything we've been longing for. So ask yourself, what are you afraid to release? What's keeping you stuck? A powerful way to practice letting go is through small daily actions. Try this. Pick one thing each day that you can release. It could be an expectation, a grudge, a worry, or even a material item you no longer need. Each time you do this, remind yourself, I am not losing. I am creating space for something better. Another practice that changed my life was learning to embrace impermanence. We often live as though everything will last forever. We assume we'll always have the people we love, the possessions we cherish, the opportunities we've been given, but nothing is permanent. And while that might sound scary, it's actually what makes life beautiful. When you truly understand impermanence, you stop taking things for granted. You stop clinging to what's already slipping away. And most importantly, you start appreciating what's here, right now. I once read an exercise that shifted my entire perspective. Each morning before starting the day, take a moment to acknowledge that everything you have today could be gone tomorrow. Not in a fearful way, but in a way that reminds you to be present, to appreciate, to love fully without attachment. Because when you live this way, you stop fearing loss. You embrace life as it is, moment by moment. There's also a simple but powerful method to free yourself from emotional burdens: writing an unsent letter. If you've ever struggled to let go of someone, or if you've held on to anger, guilt, or disappointment, try this. Take out a piece of paper and write a letter expressing everything you feel. Don't hold back. Pour it all out. Then, instead of sending it, destroy it, burn it, rip it up, throw it away. This act is symbolic. It tells your mind that you've acknowledged the pain, but you are no longer letting it define you. Because here's the truth. No one else can free you from your burdens. No one else can loosen your grip. Only you can make that choice. Seneca once said, "Begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life." What if you treated today as a fresh start? What if instead of carrying the weight of yesterday, you chose to begin again? Letting go isn't about forgetting. It's about moving forward with grace. It's about accepting that some things are meant to be part of your story, and some things are meant to be left behind. It's about realizing that freedom isn't found in control, but in the ability to release. So what's one thing you can let go of today? Maybe it's the need for validation. Maybe it's the fear of failure. Maybe it's a toxic relationship or a past mistake. Whatever it is, visualize yourself placing it in your hands and then setting it free. And notice how much lighter you feel, because when you finally stop holding on to what isn't meant for you, you make space for something greater. And that's where real peace begins. Have you ever felt trapped, not by walls or circumstances, but by something invisible, something that exists only in your mind? Maybe it's a fear that keeps you from taking the next step. Maybe it's an expectation you feel obligated to meet, even though it doesn't align with who you are. The truth is, most of the chains that hold us back are the ones we place on ourselves. Imagine standing in the middle of a busy square. You feel like every pair of eyes is on you, scrutinizing your every move. You hesitate before doing anything, fearing judgment, fearing that someone might disapprove or laugh. But here's the thing, no one is actually watching you. Everyone is too preoccupied with their own worries, their own self-doubts, their own invisible chains. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We love ourselves more than other people, yet we care more about their opinion than our own." Think about that. We spend so much time trying to impress people who are too busy worrying about themselves to notice. I remember a time in my life when I turned down an opportunity I truly wanted. Not because I lacked the skills, not because I wasn't ready, but because I was afraid. Afraid of failing, afraid of being seen as inadequate. I convinced myself that it wasn't the right time, that I needed more preparation. But in reality I was just holding myself back. And the worst part, no one else was stopping me. The only thing standing in my way was me. Fear has a way of disguising itself as logic. It whispers, "You're not ready." It tells you, "What will people think if you fail?" And before you know it, you're stuck in the same place, held captive by doubts that exist only in your head. But what if you let go of those fears? What if you broke those invisible chains? The first step to freeing yourself is to recognize them. Ask yourself, am I making this choice because I want to, or because I'm afraid of something? If fear is the reason, then you're not actually making a choice. You're avoiding one. One of the most effective ways to dismantle fear is to ask, what's the worst that could happen? We often build up worst-case scenarios in our minds, making them seem far scarier than they really are. But when you break them down, they usually aren't that bad. What if you fail? You learn. What if people judge you? They forget. What if you take a chance and it doesn't work out? You adjust and move forward. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." How many times have you worried about something that never actually happened? How much time have you wasted fearing an outcome that never came? Another way to break free from these chains is to actively seek discomfort. If you fear rejection, put yourself in situations where rejection is possible. Ask for something you know will likely be denied. Request a discount at a store that doesn't offer discounts. Start a conversation with a stranger, even if they might not respond. What happens? You realize rejection isn't as scary as you thought. The more you do this, the more you strip fear of its power. Freedom isn't about having no limits. It's about knowing which limits are real and which ones you've created in your own mind. Think about this. What's something you've always wanted to do but never tried because of fear? Now, imagine how your life would look if you let go of that fear, if you stopped allowing imaginary obstacles to control your choices. Imagine how much lighter you'd feel, how much freer you'd be. Because here's the truth, those chains only exist if you believe in them, and the moment you stop believing, they disappear. Now, what if I told you that sometimes You don't even need to physically move to change your life. That you can leave a situation without ever taking a step. We often believe that to escape something, we have to physically remove ourselves. That if we're unhappy, we need to move to a new city, quit our job, end a relationship, or make some grand external change. But what if the real prison isn't your circumstances? It's your perspective. I had a friend who hated his job. Every morning he dreaded going in. He blamed his boss, his colleagues, the long hours. He thought that if he could just find a new job, everything would be better. But after changing jobs multiple times, the feeling of dissatisfaction followed him. That's when he realized the problem wasn't the job. The problem was how he viewed it. Instead of focusing on what he couldn't control, he started focusing on what he could. He stopped letting his boss's attitude affect his emotions. He stopped complaining about the workload and instead focused on doing his work with intention. And something amazing happened. Even though nothing had changed externally, his entire experience shifted. He felt lighter, more at peace. The job hadn't changed, he had. Epictetus reminds us, it's not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. Life is the same for all of us. We will all face setbacks, disappointments, and challenges, but how we experience life is entirely up to us. So, how do you start leaving without moving? Begin by observing your thoughts. When something upsets you, don't react immediately. Instead, ask yourself, is this truly a problem, or is it just my interpretation of the situation? Most of the time, you'll realize the problem isn't the event itself. It's how you're choosing to see it. Another powerful practice is mental distancing. Imagine watching your life like a movie. When someone says something hurtful, instead of reacting, pretend you're an audience member watching yourself. Does it still feel as serious? This simple shift in perspective can transform the way you handle challenges. And finally, practice gratitude. Each day, write down 3 things you're grateful for. They don't have to be big. A warm meal, a kind word from a stranger, the ability to breathe deeply. The more you focus on what you have, the less power your problems have over you. You don't need to escape your life to find happiness. You just need to escape the thoughts that make you believe happiness is somewhere else. Because the moment you shift your perspective, you realize you were free all along. So, let me ask you, what's something in your life that you've been blaming for your unhappiness? And what would happen if, instead of trying to change it, you simply changed how you see it? Maybe, just maybe, you'd realize that freedom isn't found by running away. It's found by seeing what's already here in a whole new way. Have you ever wondered what it truly means to walk alone? Not in the sense of isolation or loneliness, but in the sense of standing so firmly in your own truth that you no longer need the noise of the world to validate your path. We live in a world where being constantly surrounded by people, by opinions, by digital noise is seen as the norm. We measure our worth by how many people approve of us, how often our phones light up with messages, how full our calendars are. But what happens when you step away from it all? What happens when you choose, even for a moment, to walk your path in silence? I used to believe that strength was found in numbers, that being surrounded by people meant I was doing something right. But then, life forced me into solitude. Plans fell through, people drifted away, and for the first time in a long time, I was left with only myself. At first, the silence was unbearable. The absence of external validation felt like standing in an empty room where my thoughts echoed too loudly. But slowly, something changed. In that stillness, I started hearing myself again. Not the voice shaped by expectations, not the voice that had been trained to seek approval, but my real voice, the one that had been drowned out for so long. And that's when I realized We're not afraid of being alone. We're afraid of facing ourselves. Because when there's no one else around, when there's no distraction to cling to, you have to confront the parts of yourself you've ignored. The doubts, the wounds, the insecurities. But here's the thing. When you stop running from yourself, you stop feeling lost. Walking alone isn't about cutting people off or rejecting connection. It's about learning to be whole within yourself so that when you do choose to connect, it's not out of need, but out of genuine desire. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And sometimes the biggest thing you need to disregard is the need to be understood by everyone else. So how do you start walking alone in a way that strengthens you instead of isolating you? Start by spending intentional time with yourself. Try this. Go to a cafe, sit down, and just exist. No phone, no book, no distractions. Just you, in the present moment. Notice how uncomfortable it feels at first, how your mind urges you to reach for something to fill the space. But if you sit with that discomfort long enough, you'll notice something shift. That need to be occupied will start to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. This is the power of solitude, not loneliness, but self-sufficiency. And here's something most people don't realize. The more comfortable you become with being alone, the stronger your connections with others become. Why? Because when you no longer rely on others to fill your emptiness, you can truly appreciate them for who they are, not for what they provide. There's another practice I always recommend: journaling without filters. Every night, write down 3 things you felt throughout the day, raw, unfiltered, without worrying about how they sound. Over time, you'll start to see patterns. You'll notice the things that truly bring you joy and the ones that drain you. And once you see them clearly, you can start making choices that align with your truth. Seneca once said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving." The process is a mutual one. We learn as we teach. When you're strong enough to stand alone, you're strong enough to choose your company wisely. You stop tolerating relationships that drain you. You stop seeking approval from people who don't understand you. And that's real freedom. But let me ask you, are you living your own life or the life others expect of you? What would happen if you stopped trying to fit in, stopped seeking permission, and simply walked your own path, fully, unapologetically? Because when you have the courage to walk alone, you'll find something most people never do: yourself. And once you find that, you'll realize you were never truly alone to begin with. Now, let's talk about something that most people misunderstand: freedom. When you hear the word freedom, what comes to mind? Maybe it's the idea of being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want. No obligations, no responsibilities, just endless possibilities. But is that really freedom? Or is that just another illusion we've been sold? Picture this. You're standing on the edge of a vast mountain range, endless open space stretching before you. There's nothing holding you back. You could go anywhere, do anything, and yet, inside, you feel trapped. Why? Because freedom isn't about external circumstances. It's about internal peace. You could have all the freedom in the world, but if your mind is shackled by fear, insecurity, or the need for approval, you'll never feel free. Epictetus, a man who was once a slave, said, "Is freedom anything else than the right to live as we wish?" Nothing else. We think we crave freedom, but what we're really searching for is the ability to let go. To let go of the things that keep us imprisoned: anger, resentment, the past, the need to be perfect, the fear of being judged. I remember a time when someone's words had the power to ruin my entire day. A single criticism, a small rejection, and suddenly I was spiraling. It wasn't until I asked myself, why am I letting someone else control my emotions, that I understood something crucial. I wasn't free, not because of my circumstances, but because I had handed over control of my peace to others. And the moment I decided to take it back, everything changed. So here's a challenge for you. The next time something upsets you, pause. Instead of reacting, ask yourself, is this within my control? Will my reaction change anything? If I let go of this emotion, how would I feel? You'll be surprised at how much lighter you feel when you stop clinging to things that don't serve you. Another way to practice true freedom is to slow down. We live in a world that glorifies busyness. The faster you move, the more successful you appear. But speed doesn't equal fulfillment. Try spending one day moving slowly. Eat your meals without rushing. Walk at half your normal pace. Listen more than you speak. Observe the world around you. You'll start to realize that freedom isn't about doing more. It's about feeling more. Seneca once said, "A man is as miserable as he thinks he is." Happiness, freedom, peace, they're not found in some distant future. They're found in how you choose to experience life right now. Imagine waking up tomorrow with no pressure to prove anything to anyone, no fear of failure, no need to impress, just you, living fully, freely, in this moment. That's true freedom. And the best part, you don't have to wait for it. You can choose it, right now. So tell me, are you ready to let go of what's been holding you back and step into the kind of freedom that no one can take away from you? Because once you do, you'll realize freedom isn't something you find, it's something you create. There's a paradox in life that few people realize. Sometimes owning nothing gives you everything. We are told that success is measured by how much we have: money, possessions, status, recognition. We chase these things believing they will bring fulfillment, but the more we acquire, the more restless we become. The moment we reach one goal, another appears. The moment we buy one thing, we crave something better, and that's not freedom. That's a cage. True wealth isn't about what you own. It's about how free you feel without needing anything at all. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." Think about the happiest moments of your life. Were they tied to expensive things, or were they found in something simple, a deep conversation, a quiet morning, a moment of pure presence? I used to believe that I needed more to feel secure. I worked hard, saved money, bought things I thought would make me happy. But the more I accumulated, the heavier I felt. Then, one day, I tried an experiment. I imagined losing everything: my job, my home, my possessions. At first, it terrified me. But then something surprising happened. I realized that even if I lost it all, I would still have the most valuable things: my mind, my ability to adapt, my capacity to start over. And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't afraid of losing things. I was afraid of losing the illusion that those things defined me. So I began letting go. I stopped chasing things that didn't bring real value. I simplified my life, decluttered not just my space, but my mind. And the strange thing? The less I had, the lighter I felt. There's an ancient Stoic practice called negative visualization. It means imagining life without the things you take for granted. Not to create fear, but to remind yourself of their true value. Try it. Imagine waking up tomorrow without the things you assume will always be there. Instead of panic, let it create gratitude. Let it remind you that everything you need, you already have. Because when you stop craving more, you realize you already have everything. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Wealth isn't found in having everything. It's found in needing nothing. So ask yourself, what are you holding on to that is actually holding on to you? A title, a material possession, an idea of who you think you need to be. What would happen if you let it go? You might just find that in losing it, you gain something far greater: peace, clarity, freedom. And when you reach that place, you'll understand. Happiness was never about having more. It was about needing less. And once you let go, you don't just free yourself, you finally start to live.